All right, welcome to Signal Black, a Darker Days series introducing and exploring the numerous Chronicles of Darkness second edition settings currently developed by Onyx Path Publishing. In this series, the hosts of Darker Days Radio, alongside some Onyx Path writers, will discuss the settings and basic mechanics of each game, highlight types of characters you can play, and explore the role playing experiences each game provides. So, who do we have here today? We have Chris. Why don't you introduce yourself?
So I'm again one host of Dark Days Radio and Darkhammer, so that's a Warhammer RPG show. And I've written for Cubicle 7 on all three Warhammer RPGs. I've also written for Vampire 5th Edition, and I've also written, it's still somewhere in the development process, for Changeling the Lost 2nd Edition.
Mhm.
Plus, we've self published a fair few things for Chronicles of Darkness.
Indeed. Indeed, we have. Indeed, we have. And we'll probably cover those a little bit when we get to different applicable settings, which means, well, hey, we have stuff we talk about for community content today. But aside from that, we're also joined by Crystal. How's it going, Crystal?
Hey, it's going really well.
Do you want to introduce yourself and discuss your Chronicles of Darkness experience a little bit?
Yeah, so I am a writer and developer for a whole bunch of different RPGs, including Chicago by Night for Onyx Path, as well as Scion No Gods, No Masters, which is coming up. For developer, I'm the developer for Third Eye Games for Pip System, and we have our Spycraft primer coming up. But for Chronicles of Darkness specifically, I actually was one of the first teams that ran this at Gen Con when they were first debuting it for
Whoa.
first edition
Wow.
many years ago. And I've played Chronicles of Darkness. I played Vampire Requiem, and I have yet to do like the new system, or for Chronicles of Darkness specifically, but I have run other games off of it. And I really, really like the concept, and I think it is vastly underused by a lot of storytellers.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, yeah. Actually, Crystal, do you have any LARP experience with the Chronicles of Darkness or Mind's Eye Theater rule
I
set that
do.
came out? Nice, nice. Maybe we can touch on that later, just
Yeah.
at the end, because that's something we did not discuss at all during the Vampire the Requiem episode.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Awesome, awesome. So, people recognize me from the previous Vampire the Requiem stream that we did, but I am Mike. I'm one of the hosts of Dark Days Radio. I don't really have many official writing credits, but a little bit of like community content stuff under my belt. And I am always excited to talk about Chronicles of Darkness because it's super rad. So you might be asking yourself, what is Chronicles of Darkness? Well, it's a premiere horror role playing setting that was originally released in 2004 under the title World of Darkness. And it's an evolution from classic horror role playing games in the 1990s and quickly developed into its own mysterious setting. In Chronicles of Darkness, you play characters in a world just like our own, a modern era with the same countries, fashions, and struggles. But underneath the facade of normality lurk creatures of the unknown, subtle magic beyond comprehension, and sinister mortals seeking to use this magic for their own selfish desires. It is in this dangerous underworld that your mortal characters explore, finding conspiracies or hauntings, cursed legacies, or technostic intrusions. Sometimes your characters might be drawn deeper into the shadows and become creatures themselves, being turned into vampires, unlocking the true sorcery of mages, or maybe even being captured and turned into one of the wondrous changelings. And that is the game that we're going to talk about today. And we're going to kind of dig down and get into some of the more details about it than those brief paragraphs we just shared right there. So I think we want to start off before getting into the rules and some of the updates there were for the second edition of Chronicles of Darkness. I think we want to just talk about what kind of characters you can play in this setting. So, yeah, I was figuring we could kind of just discuss as some examples some characters that we have played in games previously, either for first edition Chronicles of Darkness or the second edition that we're really focusing on today. So I'll just go first real quickly, just to illustrate that you can play characters that are pretty mundane. I've had a character who was just an unwitting hiker in the woods, and then stumbled across some weird stuff with ghosts. I've played in a game with Chris, a firefighter on vacation in the United Kingdom, and things did not work out very well for him. And I've even played just a mobster who, well, turned to some pretty dark stuff. So there's a lot of different kind of character concepts you can play. Crystal or Chris, you want to share some example characters from your own experiences?
Ooh, I think I've played because being a perpetual storyteller, I've not.
Oh,
Played
you can share some NPCs that you really
I've not.
liked, or
I've not played as characters too often, but I have played in a one shot of Hunter the Vigil as a I think as part of a as project as is it Task Force Valkyrie? Yeah. So that was special forces hunting some supernatural monster type thing. And then the wide variety of characters. Hell, let's think. What's one of my favorite characters from Changeling? Um, oh, it'll be like because obviously one of the things out for Changeling Lost we've self-published is Venice Unmasked. So I'm obsessed with Venice. Changeling Lost in Venice, great. One of the characters is a his seeming is beast, so he appears like as a fox like, and I think he's something like Reginald Redcoat or something like that. So he wears like he looks like he's in British fox hunting attire, but has like fox-like features, and is just a bit too British for Venice. But it's just kind of like a little bit light-hearted, but also a bit of a toff, and that's quite fitting. And is that I mean, and that fits with Changeling quite well. That kind of weird kind of fey magic. It's whimsical in some respects, while also being a bit dark. Other ones, there's too many. There's, I guess, obviously the fun one is doing my kind of Christopher Lee kind of homage in The Hunger Within, which you were saying you were playing the firefighter. The hotel owner is definitely kind of very much channeling Christopher Lee from The Wicker Man.
Yeah, there's some weird stuff. There's some weird stuff in that adventure right there.
Yeah.
Crystal, what kind of characters have you played?
Well, one of the very first characters I ever played with Chronicles of Darkness was actually the prom queen, and one of the other players was the prom king, and we got attacked on the way to the after party. And
Good. That's a good scenario. Jeez. Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was definitely something like out of a horror movie. It was wonderful. Right. I really liked it. Some of the other ideas that I've had is I've always wanted to do like play an individual who has just enough of a streak of luck to be unlucky. Meaning that they keep stumbling onto other things in the world of darkness by luck, and it ends up being really unlucky for them.
Right. Interesting. That's a fun character. I wonder if there's any like merits that could really play off that.
We can talk about that when we get to the merits section.
Okay, sure. All right. Right. So those are the kinds of characters that we've played before, and we also want to highlight. So we're mentioning, some very mundane characters. Chris was talking about some of the characters that he's used in the more, supernatural games that build off of these base set of rules. And building off the base set of rules are also some Chronicles of Darkness specific mechanics. There's rules for psychics. The first edition had a lot of rules for very interesting and funky things like skin changers and immortals, for example. Some of those have been updated to the second edition rule set, but you might have to check into a different book. For example, the immortals are now in the Mummy the Curse game as an option there. So you have to look around a little bit for some of the new rules.
I totally forgot the regular weird pigeonholed immortals are in that book.
That's right. Yep. Yeah, and there's stuff like alchemists are now in Promethean, the created
Yeah.
second edition. So there's a lot of these very mortal adjacent or kind of advanced mortal characters that you can find in other rule sets as well, which could fit very well into just your regular Chronicles of Darkness game, depending on um, what kind of power level you want to have. So let's talk about what you can do in Chronicles of Darkness. Last time when we streamed, we were talking about Vampire the Requiem, which is one of the kind of creature games that builds off of this base rule set, as we mentioned many, many times. And, if you learn the basic rules for Chronicles of Darkness, it's very easy for you to go and pick up any of these other games and play those.
Yeah.
And as well, if you played the first edition of Chronicles of Darkness, which was called World of Darkness back in 2004, things are pretty similar. There's some differences with the advanced rules, and we'll get into that, but the basic rules are pretty much the same. You make a dice pool of 10-sided dice, usually based off of a sum total of an attribute plus an ability. So maybe like intelligence plus computers. You look at those number of dots on your character sheet, add that up. That's how many dice you roll. Of those dice, any that you roll that are at 8 through 10 are a success, and count up the number of successes. And usually you need more than one success to actually fully complete the task that you're attempting. Sometimes you just need one, but a lot of the times in Chronicles of Darkness, you need several successes. The characters that you build have advantages beyond just their natural attributes and their abilities, skills and that kind of stuff. They also have merits, which are kind of just these extra edges that they have, which can really range from a whole bunch of different things, from say boxing, having boxing training, to eidetic memory, having like a photographic memory, that sort of thing. And that's where I think a lot of the flavor really comes into characters. And gives them a lot more options. Are there any merits that you two would want to kind of highlight as being cool or interesting based on your own experience?
Chris can go first on that one.
I am always interested in like the supernatural ones just because I'm drawn to that. However, I do think that the like the mental merits do tend to be a lot more fun too, because those are things like, because being immortal and interacting with supernatural creatures, your mind gets erased a lot. And so having these as a mortal character, like good time management, imagine how someone with that, where their mind keeps getting erased and you're losing chunks of time. So a mortal with that is going to notice that a lot quicker than somebody without, and be driven further to continually try to figure out what is happening in those spaces of time.
I would say the interesting, let's think, merits. Yeah, there's quite a few nice, like small. I think again, it's the small kind of supernatural merits, which they're not going to be game changers in the sense of like a vampire has coils or has some or a werewolf has merits which essentially tie them to their totem spirit for the pack. They're not going to be magnificent like that, but like the very simple things of just being the sixth sense, however that manifests in many different ways to the characters, or something as simple as having, is it psychometry, the one where you can touch an object and get psychic visions off it? I think that's one. Psychometry, there's something like that. But it's amazing when you run a full Mortals game how those powers, which win from the perspective of the big splats, the other supernatural creatures, they seem nothing. But when you're in, say, playing Hunter the Vigil or just pure mortals, those tiny merits are so important.
Yeah, that's a good point. So when you two are making your characters for Chronicles of Darkness, let's say either for your own game or you're making up a whole bunch of characters for an adventure or something, as pre-gens, do you usually pick like, let's say one of those like cool, interesting, more supernatural abilities or more exotic abilities, I guess you could say, and then fill in the rest of the dots with the more generic things, say, but very useful things like, say, contacts or resources, just having money, that sort of thing. What's the strategy you usually go for when making your characters? That's how I do it.
I
Actually,
think
I
there's
usually try to pick one spicy thing, and then you just load up on the generic but useful things when I'm
I
making
think
pre-gen characters.
there's some spicy, just non-supernatural merits, so there's often something to pick like from that. And I think also the great thing is, and we saw it first in Hunt of the Vigil first edition, then it made it into Chronicles of Darkness second edition, is in the baseline for all the games, is professional training.
Right,
And
right.
just picking that, and that unlocks some bonuses. It also gives some guidance on the skill sets. That's almost the first port of call before you even start thinking like, oh, I'm going to have fleet of foot, or I'm going to have, sorry, I've got the book open here, or I'm going to have fixer or iron will. The moment you can go, right, I'm going to pick professional, and I'm going to be a stunt man, right? Something that's similar to stuntman, because stuntman, again, these are quite, you can stretch what stuntman means. I mean, stuntman could
Sure,
be
sure.
a perfect way of representing your an extreme sports personality who's like renowned on like the snowboarding circuit. There you go, pick stuntman, done.
Mhm.
And then you would go. You've got athletics and drive. You might change drive to go, well, I'll swap out that skill. The GM
Exactly.
goes, the storyteller goes, yeah, okay, let's swap that out, and then it gives you that focus. I think that's the first port of call on making any character.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point, Chris. And that's a great transition to some of the kind of new things with second edition is those profession packages. And for new players that are new to Chronicles of Darkness, these packages aren't character classes, but they are just kind of a little leg up for your characters that you can pick, which gives them some extra skill dots and maybe a merit as well. And it's a good place to start, as Chris mentioned. And as well as Chris was alluding to, it's pretty easy to make your own professional training packages as well. So, if you don't see something that really matches up with your character who's a archaeologist or something, let's say, it's not that hard to make. Just say like investigation and I don't know,
History.
occult
Crafts,
or something.
crafts is always good on that one.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So it's pretty easy to make those changes. Just talk to your storyteller about it, and I think they'll be pretty chill about it. I mean, it's nothing too extreme. So let's move on to talking about some of the new things in Chronicles of Darkness Second Edition. We already talked about the real basic mechanics, but there are some very interesting things that have changed with Second Edition, and I think they're all improvements in my personal opinion. So first up, for more, and most of the changes really came from advanced rules. I mentioned the basic rules are pretty much the same. So some of the advanced rules changed, such as combat, which, combat's a failure state. In my personal games, you're not usually tussling and fighting every session. And in fact, I like to think it's pretty rare. But combat has been revised to be more dangerous, particularly with weapons, because they have a lot more basic automatic successes, automatic damage that you apply once you hit. So in first edition, if you played that, there was a lot of kind of attrition, and just characters taking like one little damage, kind of pecking away at each other. So with the change to the math of second edition, resolution is sped up quite a bit, and combat is a bit more dangerous. It's a lot easier to get hurt fast. Another great innovation with Chronicles of Darkness Second Edition is, of course, the tilts and conditions, and these are basically new story game mechanics that are here in the game. So conditions are a state that can be applied to a character, illustrating how the game has changed them or how the story has changed and affected them. So I should actually probably just bring up an example here because I think that will probably speak pretty well.
Yep.
Let me just scooch through the book here. So let's go for deprived. Okay. A character is suffering from an addiction. And this addiction for the deprived condition, it could be pretty vague. It could be, something like drugs, alcohol, or it could be some other kind of crutch that your character develops. Maybe something to do with the supernatural or one of the mysteries that they're exploring. And while they have this condition and they are deprived, they remove 1 die from stamina resolve and composure rolls. So that's a pretty big effect. However, your character does have a way to resolve this deprivation. In this case, the resolution is indulging in the deprived vice or going to therapy. So you have 2 ways to try to get rid of the condition and resolve that through actions in the story. So it gives characters and gives players a way to interact and kind of like a guide to just kind of interact with the story more. And I think that's great.
I think the important thing about conditions is that it resolves the classic issue with classic Chronicles of Darkness. We'll call that classic to just differentiate from
Sure.
5th edition Vampire the Masquerade, because you have the classic issue with character building of I'm going to take these flaws to get some freebie points to build my character better, and we don't have that. There are no flaws you can take mechanically in that sense, as part of your character build. So you can play a character that has an addiction or suffers from has some sort of, perhaps some, is suffering from some form of mental illness, if you wanted to go that route, or some sort of physical hindrance. So they could well be missing a limb or something like that, if you wanted to build a character like that. But it's not going to give you automatically freebie points that I will then spend in psychic,
Right.
or whatever. Right. Instead, those are conditions that you're going to have in game that are going to be persistent, essentially. And role playing so that they are a hindrance to you in role play means you're going to be rewarded through role play with the what are they called? Experiences? No,
Beats.
experiences.
Yeah.
Beats.
Yep.
And that's the difference. So in order to gain the benefit of some hindrance that you've created you've said my character has at character creation, you have to role play that. You can't just go, I'm going to take this flaw and yet do everything you can so that flaw never comes up in play. And that's really, I feel that is a key difference in Chronicles of Darkness 2nd edition.
It's really a beautiful design too, because there are individuals in real life that may have missing limbs or have some sort of thing that would have been considered a flaw, such as glasses, and they function in society with very little change to their day-to-day other than whatever accommodation they need for that. And so taking that away as a detriment to a character sheet takes away the negative aspect of playing one of those characters. And it encourages more people to get creative with some of those things. Like, you can be an alcoholic and still be high functioning.
Yes.
Like, and people can never know that you are actually an alcoholic. And so having it not be part of the character sheet, but more the role play and the way that the character is seen, it takes away the mechanical stuff and makes it more about the person and the individual, rather than I'm going to take a negative to every single time I have a sight roll or, some sort of investigation. If I don't have my glasses, oops. Like, I don't go anywhere without my glasses.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a great point. How do you two feel about having characters start with conditions? Just say like, hey, storyteller, I want to start with these couple of conditions already with my character, and then we'll resolve those over the course of the game. How do you feel about that?
I think with the right conversation about what those are and the confidence that the player can portray that. I mean, it doesn't have to be in every session. You don't want to labor it, maybe.
Right. You could
But
have, for example, I was looking at amnesia. It's
yeah,
one of the first conditions on there. Character can start with that, and that makes a lot of sense. And then they have
Yep.
things revealed to them as the story goes.
and it kind of creates character goals in some respects on resolving
Mhm.
these things. Because going back to the alcoholic, you see enough horror and maybe your perspective on life changes. You're like, yeah, or maybe it gets worse. However,
Yeah.
however you want it to go. So
Right.
I think that works quite well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So tilts are interesting. As Chris mentioned, as he was talking about them, when you resolve conditions, you get beats, which then can get converted into experience points for the entire party. And it kind of gives you that benefit to doing this role playing, which gives you a nice little kind of economy as the game goes through. And it's really nice. I think that the conditions, especially in basic Chronicles of Darkness and Vampire the Requiem, are pretty elegant and are very easy to work with. And I think that makes it a really fun and streamlined experience.
Also,
Especially,
oh,
please go
I was
ahead.
gonna say, if you were not aware, if you go to any of the conventions where Onyx Path is hosting panels or having a booth, they will usually have con specific condition cards for your game.
What?
So, and you
What?
can collect all of them. Yeah, they're
I
con
haven't.
specific
I haven't.
ones.
I've seen Onyx Path at so many cons. I never got one.
Wait, really?
Whoopsie doodle. Yeah, it's fine.
Oh,
I just didn't
Mhm.
know. So thank you for informing me, Crystal. I'll make sure I can pick one up in the future. Awesome, awesome. Yeah, and I just had really and you were mentioning the condition cards, which is what I was about to talk about.
yep.
It's an accessory to the game, but it does make it a lot easier if you have these condition cards. You can just hand them out during the game so that people know and just have it right there in front of them, so they don't have to dig through the book to get the resolution or grab the
Yeah.
book from the storyteller. It's just right there, and it's easy to work with, which I think is very convenient.
And also you can come up with more conditions. I mean, again, Chronicles of Darkness core book has a list of them. They're more kind of your base level of conditions. Maybe there's conditions in each of the Chronicles of Darkness game lines. So each core book, has
Right.
has all the Chronicles of Darkness
Yep.
rules. This, if you get it, say you're playing Vampire the Requiem, and you also buy this. This is like, therefore, let's just say the more in-depth encyclopedia, as it were, to the game
Right.
rules, and gives you some more conditions to use, because the vampire one will have some more vampire specific conditions. So
Correct.
there's a lot. I think I would say the other guidances don't feel overwhelmed by them. Like, you should be using them constantly in cards in and out. They're a guide to role play. They're not a prescribed. This
It's
is
not
how
a
things
poker
have to go.
game.
No, it's not a poker game. No.
Maybe it is though. Ooh.
Maybe it is. Yeah. Yeah. But there's that.
I think all the condition cards are actually on drive-through cards, if I'm
Yes,
not
they are.
mistaken.
I need
Yeah,
to
they
print
should
them
be.
all
I
out
think
at
you
some
can
point.
actually. Can you print them out for free, or is it
Yep.
like $1 for the?
You can buy the PDF and print them for free if you've got the ability to do so, or you can do POD.
All right,
Yeah, you can have the
looking
card
at
deck
this right
printed
now.
on demand.
You can. I have the Vampire the Requiem cards. Oh, okay. And $3 for the PDF. That's 44-page PDF for $3. Okay. Okay. That's not too shabby. And you can just print them out for yourself, or you can get the print on demand cards as well. Neat. All right. Doing research live on the show. So we also just wanted to bring up tilts, which are similar to conditions, but they are more environmental effects or personal effects to the character. Usually something external occurring to them, such as like it being foggy out or them being temporarily blinded for some reason. And that's kind of tilts right there. And Crystal, you had a great way to remember tilts versus conditions.
Yeah. So if anybody is familiar with oh, now I'm blanking on the
Pinball.
name. Pinball.
Yep.
There we go. Oh my gosh. Now you put me on the spot. If anyone remembers
Sorry.
pinball, if you move the board too much, In order to gain an advantage with the ball, it is called a tilt, and the entire thing will lock up and you'll lose your ball. So it's pretty similar to the tilts in the game where you can kind of wiggle a little bit to kind of try and gain an advantage. But if it goes too much, things lock up and it gets bad for you.
Yeah, that's a fun way to remember them. And yeah, that's tilts, conditions, and like the changes to combat and equipment. I don't know, Chris and Krista, were there any other major changes with second edition that you wanted to highlight, or did that kind of cover the big things?
I think that's the big things. I think within the game, and this again is the fact that second edition Chronicles of Darkness is a distillation of things that came out over the lifespan of Chronicles of Darkness first edition. So, for example, we've got some mechanical rules for social combat is in there now. We have also how to kind of a mechanized way of dealing with whether you make friends. I say make friends, but it's more like opening doors, as in like, can you influence this person? And that's not a bad thing, because again, you don't have to use these rules if you don't want to, but they're very useful if you go, look, this is complicated because we're trying to role play out and describe how your character is in. I'm going to take my example because I've been watching like tons of The Good Wife recently. So say you're wanting to influence the district attorney, right? There is a number of steps you're going to have to do to influence a person like that in power. And you, as players, as the storyteller, you may not feel armed to role play that out in a way that you're in character conversing and describing all those things. So you could just go like, look, let's use the dice system that's provided to do this, and we can then describe it as a montage of things, or say, well, you've got that bit that's going to happen, but you're not going to be able to make the next roll to influence them until a certain number of sessions that represents a certain amount of game in-game time that's gone by. So that's really useful. There's also some guidance on investigations and how you can break that up into stages. Again, depending upon the type of investigation, again, it's a crutch if you don't have the knowledge or the confidence to role play these things out, in that way.
Yeah, the investigation rules can also help because, or investigation guidance, I should say, because designing your own investigations and mysteries can be a bit of a time-consuming hassle. Having to put in like 3 clues at every single point to make sure that hopefully the characters notice one of them, and that sort of thing. So it is very useful. Cool. So we talked about the characters in the game. We talked about some of the rules updates, but why don't we talk about, especially for new people, what can you explore in this game? What kind of stories can you tell? Because that's really the big thing with Chronicles of Darkness, is telling stories. Mm-hmm. So, like any good role-playing game, there's infinite ways to play Chronicles of Darkness, but the rules as written, as well as some of the stories and chronicle ideas in the back, give you a couple of great concepts to kind of run along with. So I think the big one actually would probably be Gnosticism, tech Gnosticism, and the God Machine, since the God Machine Chronicle is part of Chronicles of Darkness 2nd Edition. Now, the concept of the God Machine was something that originated actually back in 2004 with the first version of this game, and has been kind of like seeded just little bits here and there in all these different books. And I mean, there's like, there's been people that have been like looking for all the references in every single book, trying to track down everything about the God Machine. And second edition really gives you some great ways to play with that concept. Now, the God Machine is large and unknowable, but seems to be a sort of intruder, possibly not from this planet, which is trying to influence and control the world through techno-magical means. Chris on our show Darker Days Radio has used a lot of good examples of like, slowly creeping through a building, which gets just stranger and stranger and has more and more mechanical devices in it until you finally get to the basement and find that in the center there's like, say, an organ beating with circuits, cables, and all these other things kind of leading off of it. And that's essentially probably a piece of infrastructure of the God Machine.
Yeah, it's the God Machine is I feel is really Chronicles of Darkness answer to Eldritch horror.
Yeah.
But where Lovecraftian mythos Eldritch horror seems very, how can I say, gooey, fleshy, and and has its associated evils that it focuses on as well, and issues with when it was written. Let's just be honest with its fits. I think the God Machine is quite relevant. It's still quite relevant with today's society because it's about it's about like how you don't we've got all these devices, all these things linked up, and it's that how you see things operating together, and we feel we know how they should operate, and like you go to a URL and it pings a server and it sends back a web page and it does all this stuff, but it's more like if these things were used together in a way that creates some occult effect, because that's effectively what occultism involves. You draw out runes, but the question is if these runes are actually operating on a city scale and are servers all linked up, or people that are standalone constructs who've gone around spray painting the same symbol in multiple locations, and it creates a geomantic effect. I also go with when science goes really weird, when you get to the bleeding edge of it. So, where you really push at the very edge of reality and you don't know where physics kind of falls apart. It's that kind of horror. There's a good amount of Videodrome in there as well, I would definitely go with.
Yeah, certainly. Kind of and it's the horror version of the Internet of Things in some ways.
Yes,
I can
yeah,
definitely
it
see that.
definitely is. Yeah, it is
Yeah.
the horror of the Internet of Things.
Hmm.
That relates
Yeah.
to my day job. Shit.
Indeed. So there's a lot of mystery just around like what exactly the God Machine wants, what it is, and I don't think your characters are ever going to find out really the real truth, that the terrible secret of space. But they might realize what this one little component is doing to their community, and then realize that they can't stop it, and that could be the horror right there. For example, Crystal, do you have any thoughts and opinions on the God Machine
I
or
love
that
God
kind of?
Machine.
Yeah.
I do. I kind of view it as, how like every couple of years there's always like the apocalypse, the end of the world is coming type of thing, because some ancient stone said it, that
2012,
like some
2000.
ancient circular stone ended on this day, and instead of putting it as their calendar just ended.
I'm just thinking of the Monty Python thing. Like, what's that inscribed on the stone? It's a long message, and then just like, ugh. I just imagine the stone tablet. They're like, okay, 2011, 2012. Ugh.
I kind of view it like that, mixed in with the house from 13 Ghosts.
Oh yeah.
Where you have a very much a mechanical thing going on, but it affects everybody. And if you don't follow the mechanical, like even like the rules that it follows, if you don't follow it, you are messing with the God Machine's plan, and it must reset you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I view it as, or like some sort of entity on the internet. Put the 13 Ghost house on the internet and see what happens.
Yeah, that is interesting. So the God Machine has angels, by the way. They're scary as hell. And they're kind of like in that case, the antibodies that are out kind of correcting, changing, and consuming what is not, I wouldn't say what's wrong, but what is not in keeping with the God Machine's plan or vision. And those angels, of course, can go rogue, and we'll talk about that another time. So I think that covers the cosmic horror option. And you can, of course, you can do other kind of cosmic option. You could put in some Lovecraftian deities if you wanted to. There's definitely a very, maybe not so much with the second edition, but the first edition, there was a real Lovecraftian feel to it. This real mystery about not understanding what's going on with this world, and a feeling that the world was out to get you. Which I think can bring us to some other options, such as occult mystery. So we don't need to have the God machine all the time. You could just be investigating something that's really peculiar in your neighborhood, and maybe that plays off of some classic horror tropes. Perhaps the town elders made some pact years and years ago, and you're trying to figure that out, or maybe you realize that it's something more related to one of the kind of creature game lines that we've mentioned before, like Vampire the Requiem, or
You come from a
Deviant.
line of sin eaters.
Indeed. Oh yeah, that'd be a good one. That'd be going right there. So lots of story ideas for occult mystery, but also just mechanical support as well. A lot of those conditions are written for that kind of thing.
And that gets us to the point where, when you talk about occult mystery and supernatural mystery, Chronicles of Darkness, the thing that ties all the other splats, all the other supernatural creatures that you can play using that base rule set together, is because the core rulebook for Chronicles of Darkness second edition has expansive rules for ephemeral beings. So angels are one of these things, but also just spirits, so animistic spirits from the shadow, where concepts and things are manifest. So like we're talking about, say, let's say the concept of a murder down a particular alleyway manifests in the spirit realm as this anthropomorphic being made of rusted knives that stick together and has a mouth full of needles.
That's a great image.
Yeah. But then also you've got ghosts. They're ephemeral beings, and they obviously have ties to the underworld and the lower depths and so forth. And then you've got really good rules for that, which allow you to look at the different type of powers that they have, manifestations and hauntings and so forth. So you can run a really good, just like ghost investigations type game with Chronicles of Darkness. And then there's also, was it dread powers? So dread powers, again, quite common to many of the antagonists in the other game lines. And dread powers are great for representing things which don't really fit any one particular kind of beastie, because if you want to do cryptid-based horror, that's quite good. So ultimately, what we've just covered there gives you the tools that quite happily with Chronicles of Darkness, you can run X-Files. Like, just do X-Files. Like, you go, what's this horrible thing? Is it a cryptid? And does that cryptid obey known science? Or does it not obey known science? So you can do that with dread powers. That's great. Or is it ephemeral? Is it a ghost in the machine? Is it a ghost possessing a computer server or something like that? And then you can go... You could even do aliens. If you really want to go down aliens, you can do aliens. They've just got dread powers and spaceships and whatever. So you can pick and choose the powers, the abilities, the systems to create the antagonists you want. I mean, honestly, if you're going to do aliens, though, how often are players going to really come face to face with a grey? They're mostly going to do the classic thing of dealing with the people that have been driven mad by their encounters with them and driven to do horrible things. That's always more scary than facing the actual cause. Or of course, there's always the shadowy government agents that are trying to cover it up. So yeah, that you could do that type with Chronicles of Darkness more than happily. It's like it's just there.
Good stuff. Yeah, and I think for the other game types that you can play, going away from the kind of crazy supernatural stuff and cosmic horror, you can play a lot more street level games. Perhaps dealing with personal horror, which is something that can intrude into any of these other game types, really. And again, conditions can be useful for personal horror. Although I would not really rely on them. It takes a lot of player buy-in and some kind of design and working with you on that in that regard. And then as well, crime, thrillers, that sort of thing. I think Chris put in the note here about the horror of the human heart. That's also a great option for Chronicles of
Yeah,
Darkness.
I think the reason I put that in is because that kind of gets us towards something like Seven and films and media like that, where and Hannibal, the TV series. That I think
Mhm.
you could. I mean, that's basically what I want to run, kind of quite similar to that as a chronicle. So if you see us running that very at some point on the Twitch stream, that's the reason why. Um, but it's that kind of horror because the the thing about playing vampires and werewolves and changelings and so forth is that by being a monster, your drive to do horrible things is often a consequence of the changes you've gone through to be what you are. So it then becomes quite horrific when you see people do things and they have no other reason to be doing that, no other external influences other than they're just horrible people doing horrible things. And that can then be more terrifying than the fact that a vampire hungers for blood, because that's a curse. Uh, yeah, and I think that would be more than that would be great for running a game. And I think if you ran that long enough, and then it begins to like tilt over into occult horror, like that would then you could run that for you could then really suck your players in, and then suddenly you do something, and they're left thinking like, hold on a minute, what you've just upended something we were taking for granted at one point, and now there's a murder that doesn't make any sense, and then you can start injecting things that maybe fit more with Hunter the Vigil.
Now I have another idea too.
Do you want to
Oh
share
my
it?
gosh. It's so basically there is one person at the table that is immortal, but nobody knows who it is. And so everybody has to act like a mortal in order to keep themselves hidden.
Yeah, yeah.
And then
Hmm.
everyone plays
I
different game
like it.
lines.
Hey, that's a great idea. That is tough to do, but that's a great idea. Because Chris, remember when we were in Berlin and we are just walking
I was
around
talking
being
about
like,
this the
yeah,
other
we're
day.
totally regular people. And then we find out at the end of the night, like, okay, so there were our company of 6 people was 4 wizards, 4 mages, and 2 werewolves.
Or walking into the bar and being like, "There we are, dressed in suits. We're looking pretty dapper.
Yep.
We're technocracy agents, so we're still effectively human.
Yeah.
And we're just normal bros. We're just in there
Yeah.
after a night on the town, away from business. We're not
Those
dressed
2 other
heavy.
guys in the company, the other 2 guys, they're just kind of they're a little funky hacker types, nothing weird about them, right?
And then we walk into
Nope,
that bar,
totally.
and just because we're well dressed in suits, and having someone go, "So I'm of Clan Ventru," we're like, "Really?
Yes, what is
Okay.
this? Tell us
What's
more.
How not to be a vampire is just broadcast it.
Indeed.
Uh, that's a total aside.
Oh my gosh, Crystal, it's a great idea. I really like that. That seems like a fun concept. Would you do that as a one shot or as a multi-session
Oh my
chronicle,
gosh,
multi-session story?
I would probably want to, like, we could totally do it as a one shot, but we would have to go like all out. Like,
Yeah.
it would have to be like a all out, like 5, 6, 7 players, just to make it so that nobody really knows what in the heck is going on, but all this weird stuff starts happening and nobody's fessing up to it.
But hold on, the fun will be like when like I don't know when like the fun will be just when, say, you've got a vampire character that's there, obviously being as human as possible, along with the human and the mage going, "What?" When the changeling just does something which completely breaks the rules of anything anyone understands.
Oh, then I want to throw a mummy in there just for fun.
Like, at least a
Oh, it
sin
just
eater is pretty. A sin eater is still pretty human, but again,
They are, yeah.
hard to
or
kill.
Promethean. Oh my gosh, throwing a Promethean in there.
Yeah, I'd have to review the disquiet rules for second edition, but that could cause some issues right there. Yeah,
Oh no,
yeah.
that brings us to how does Contagion Chronicle deal with all of that, and then you chuck a regular human in.
Well, I don't really, I don't
Interesting.
talk about this too much below, but
Yeah.
that is part of our show notes, so we can get to that discussion. In fact, I think we've kind of exhausted some of the game concepts, but Crystal, this is leading us into a great conversation about in Chronicles of Darkness, who can you meet? Because Chronicles of Darkness, it's an
Right.
expansive world with 11 major monsters to play as, in addition to the mortals that we've just been discussing. And again, it's all the same game rules, and the basic game rules from Chronicles of Darkness are printed in all of the core books. So if you pick up Werewolf the Forsaken, for example, you will get the basic rules in there with some of the merits. Usually, the merits and conditions are tailored to that specific game line. So there is value in getting the Chronicles of Darkness core book because, as Chris mentioned before, it goes into more depth and gives you a lot of extra options for mortal characters and for any supernatural creature as well. And yeah, Chronicles of Darkness, it's great to play by itself, but and storytellers don't need to feel like they need to add in any of these other creatures, but the option is always there if it would serve to enhance the story and the mystery of your chronicle. So as we've been alluding to, you can mix and match any of these things all together, as Crystal was just mentioning, and characters can in fact start off as a mortal, and you can then have them change over the course of the story. Maybe they are drawn into a mage cabal, for example, and they start to learn that kind of magic, or maybe they deviant. The
Ooh, that would
character
be a good one.
disappears for a couple of sessions. They come back and they've been changed by some evil corporation, some vile conspiracy, for example. That is a great way to use deviant right there and to really enhance one of the characters. So yeah, you can mix and match. I remember back in the day when Chronicles of Darkness first came out in 2004, people were always planning these chronicles where everyone would start off mortal, and then after say 3 sessions or something, then they would change and it would be like kind of a mixed chronicles. One would be a mage, one would be a werewolf, one would be a vampire, for
I played
example.
in a couple of those.
Really? Hey, how did that work out?
I loved it because it took it took like I played a vampire character and I was with a Promethean, and like it just made weird interactions. It was wonderful because I can't tell them what they are. They know what I am, wink, wink. But
A werewolf, a vampire and a Promethean walk into a bar. The vampire says to the Promethean, "What's it like stealing bodies?" And the Promethean says to the vampire, "What's it like stealing blood?"
Pretty much. It's
Yep.
Yeah, it's it's one of those things where you've got to have the player buy-in to have the reasoning for why such coincidence occurs for it. But it's I do also see like the whole thing of like, you do get the mass embraces of a bunch of people for whatever reason by multiple sires in vampire. That makes sense, I guess. Mage, you could all have been exposed to the same sort of event that causes an awakening for you all in some way. Werewolf, I guess you're all related by blood by some way. That would make the most sense to have and that's a great way of having a pack already kind of, a great buy-in for why they're all working together.
Just form it that way. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different options. And I feel that even, it's kind of a stereotype at this point for urban fantasy fiction, not really urban fantasy, but having the small town where there's a bunch of different supernatural creatures, for example, that works pretty decently in Chronicles of Darkness. There could just be one werewolf that moved in, or maybe a couple of them, just the one vampire who's running things because the town doesn't have enough blood to support more than one vampire, for example. I think that works pretty well, and that could be a great way to get a bunch of characters together from different splats, as we call them,
Hmm.
because they're all in the same town, and something weird starts happening. They unfortunately are the only ones that can figure it out.
The other thing also is while there are 11 major monsters to play, you can also play the minor elements of each of those splats. So you can play as a vampire's ghoul. You could play as a mummy, a member of a mummy's cult. So you're again effectively human, but with a few
Oh my
useful
gosh.
merits. Um, you can play as kinfolk to. Is it still kinfolk for a werewolf? Yeah.
Yep.
Wolf-blooded.
And
Oh, is it
there's
wolf-blooded?
wolf blooded,
Yeah.
and then there's
Okay.
the I can't remember what it is for changeling, where their fate. I think that it's something like fey touched or something like that. And in demon, I think it's where you've got like you've mostly made a pact with a demon, or you've got you're a stigmatic. So there's quite a
Yep.
few different ways you can be still quite mortal but a little bit weird, and therefore worked into these things. And I mean, this is the one thing we've always said, like the weirdest, the one really weird like grouping that has perhaps the most thematic crossover is you've got a mummy and their cult has a mechat vampire, because mechat vampires can do post-death embraces where they've embalmed the person that's going to be embraced. So they're very Egyptian based as well. You could quite easily have a mage that has a methodology and their tools to perform their magic and so forth. They use Egyptian mysticism to do that, and of course on board with the mummy because they find mystical items filled with Sekhem. And then what else have you got in there? I see an Osiren um, Promethean fits that quite well. Sin
Mhm.
Eaters, again, they could have a group of Sin Eaters that have a mythology, their ceremonies. They've worked, their workings are all very Egyptian based, and you've got the
Mhm.
basis of a group that work together thematically, ideologically maybe a little bit, have a bit of issues with it, but also above all this, you've got this super powerful mummy who leads them, and some of them may say hello to him quite often down through the ages, because the vampire's like, I'll see you in a couple of 100 years maybe. um
Yep.
I'm
and yeah.
I'm kind of liking the idea of a chronicle with just mortal sidekicks, where it is all of these people who are slightly touched, but really have no idea exactly what's going on.
Yes.
What,
And
venting
so
their
the
Yes.
issues?
Yes. Okay. I got it. Crystal. So when all the big supernatural creatures are all meeting in like their Elysium or their ivory tower or something, it's just the guys in like the side room, like the drivers basically just like hanging out, trying to figure out what's going on. Maybe they have to go on their own adventure, a little errand to find a magical MacGuffin today and that sort of thing.
like the
That could be a lot
supernatural
of
people
fun.
don't even realize that there's like a fey touch and a wolf blood and a ghoul, or like even not even like a ghoul, just like a mortal dude all in the same room.
There's
Mm.
and the mostly highly unaware, there's also like a ghost there that's a friend of one of the Sin
Oh
Eater.
yeah, there we go.
There's just a ghost. Because you can do playable ghosts. Yeah, you can definitely do
You
playable
can.
ghosts.
You
Yeah.
can. The ghost could try to get them into the Geist's cult. Could
Or
be preaching to them like,
the
hey,
ghost finally thinks it's got a group of people that have time for them and goes, "Can you resolve my death?"
oh, sure, there we go.
And then you have like the one dude that's trying to become a hunter, like in here, like one of you is it. I know it.
Perfect. And Crystal, that's a great segue because there's Hunter the Vigil, which is another game about it's about hunters who go after the supernatural, whether either researching them or trying to destroy them. And these hunters can be very mortal, or they can have these endowments, which are rather powerful abilities. Perhaps magical, or perhaps technological, But that's another way to kind of enhance a Chronicles of Darkness game and give it some more options as you go along. Because Hunter has all these different compacts and conspiracies, which can give you some cool organizations that characters could get involved with.
And the cool thing by bringing up Hunter is, if you want to play Hunter, and you go, oh, we want to hunt vampires. They don't have to be the vampires of Vampire the Requiem. So you don't have to use those rules to represent vampires.
Yeah, they're
You can
hunting
actually
revenants.
you can, in fact, just inject your own vampire mythology and do that. But then also, there are plenty of vampires in Chronicles of Darkness that aren't kindred. Just as there's plenty of werewolves that aren't the I wanted to say
Uratha.
but they're not Uratha. So you can mix and match it, and that means then, and that's true for all the game lines, that you can inject a lot of mystery by the fact you go, okay, you're facing a werewolf, but it's in play mode. You go, oh well, yeah, you're like, no, but it's not Aratha. Like, none of the signs, nothing is recognizably Aratha other than something is a big wolf-like beastie causing mayhem. And the other important thing by bringing up Hunter, and I think that represents also how you approach Chronicles of Darkness for all of the game lines, is tiers. So the tiers of gameplay, it's basically about, is the stories that you're telling about people who have, whether they're vampires, whether they're mortals, whatever, is very focused, very local, personal horror, or are they, or at the very high end, are they trying to fight something on a very global, even cosmological kind of scale of horror? And again, depending on how you run your games, and it gives you a very different focus, a different feel. It's the difference between season 1 Supernatural, where they're just killing the freak of the week, versus season God knows what, where they're killing
15,
God.
season 15.
It's that kind of, but that's the point.
Yeah.
And the other thing that it leads me into thinking is also, and this is something we can grab entirely from Wrath and Glory, Warhammer 40k, is you can quite easily, and I think it's a perfectly good way of gameplay, and we've seen this actually in the form of a novella for Chronicles of Darkness, is you could do multiple shades of night. So in the novel I'm referring to, 3 Shades of Night, you have 3 short stories, one which looks at a vampire protagonist, one that looks at a werewolf, and then finally it is a mage, and the story ends with the mage, and there's crossover between those characters. So you could do the same thing with Chronicles of Darkness. If you want to go all in, you can go, right, this story, which takes place over a number of sessions, is just mortals. And they all eventually die at the end, because that's what happens. But that's much like the very start of a Supernatural episode, where like, oh, look, the kids are doing something. Oh, it all goes horrific. They're all dead. And that's when the actual characters turn up to do something, to solve the mystery. And I think that's a good way of getting people to buy in and also to explore different types and different things of it. I also have to apologise to Matthew Dawkins, because when the Contagion Chronicle Kickstarter was going, and he was like, oh, we're going to have this location, there's going to be this place for a Contagion, there's going to be this place that has a version of the Contagion Chronicle. And I was like, what about the one in Chicago with the crossover there? And he was like, oh, I forgot Chicago setting. Yeah. And I think that likely leads us into Dark Eras about crossover as well, because Dark Eras offers some great crossover opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. So Onyx Path put out these 2 source books called Dark Eras, and they provide a plethora of historical crossover settings. So while all the Dark Eras are focused on the different creature game lines, there are a couple that are useful for vanilla Chronicles of Darkness. The one that I really wanted to highlight, I think, was Doubting Souls, which is a setting based around early New England with the witch hysterias up in Salem, but also gives you some ideas for how colonists and native peoples would be interacting at this time and sort of the potential occult issues that could be taking place. This was originally written for Hunter the Vigil, but it's very accessible for just regular mortals. there really is nothing separating the two. So I think that's definitely a good one that you can check out if you want kind of some historical flair. Some of the other Hunt the Vigil settings could be applicable. For example, there's one set in I was just looking it up, but now I can't remember it. In the late Qing Dynasty in China. So if you want a very different setting from the modern United States, you can definitely go there. And that also crosses over with Mummy the Curse a little bit, which would be pretty interesting to use alongside regular Chronicles of Darkness Mortals. Yep.
Yeah, I've not really run anything historical yet with Chronicles of Darkness. Or have I? No, I've not yet. It's always been something at the back of my mind, an idea, but it's always having the time to run it amongst all the other games that you ever run.
Correct. Yeah, Dark Eras are interesting. They don't have a whole lot of historical facts in them. They really expect you to go do a little bit of your own research, check out at least the Wikipedia entry on that time period. But it gives you some extra story ideas specific to supernatural creatures and gives you some extra rules that might be applicable to that setting. So that's pretty neat. And then finally, Chris, we have the Contagion Chronicle that you're alluding to, which is an open-ended global crossover chronicle that even normal mortals can get involved with. And, this can be a great way, the Contagion Chronicle, to get normal mortals involved with the Hunter the Vigil conspiracies. Because, the Contagion, it's so depending on how exactly you design it, because you have a lot of freedom and sandbox nature to make your own Contagion Chronicle. It's usually rather global, or at least regional, as opposed to just your neighborhood or that sort of thing, which is usually the smaller level that Chronicles of Darkness Mortals will be dealing with. So I think that's a great way if you want to ramp up and get your characters involved with the conspiracies. You can go into Contagion Chronicle right there.
So the cool thing about Contagion is there's so many different ways of representing what it is, and it's and there's what are they called? Oh, I can't remember now. But there's so many little not only is it how the protagonist monsters that you are can team up, there's also how the antagonists also interact and team up.
Yep. Which
is terrifying. Like, let's just think about that for a moment. You've got, say, the Seers of the Throne and their representatives, them who are representatives of the Exarchs, working with Angels of the God Machine. That's like a nightmare scenario, right? Also, I could see those two groups like wanting to annihilate each other, because you're going to have to, in thinking about that, might have some reasoning for how the Exarchs, what they consider the God Machine. Is it a tool of theirs? Are they tools of the God Machine, etc.? You've got some of these really big kind of metaphysical questions that you can potentially tease out some answer to, or at least the players are going to have an opportunity to delve into.
Yep, it's pretty neat. And then also, the Contagion Chronicle has the player's guide out now, which gives you some extra crossover rules between all the different supernatural splats, which can be definitely very useful for general Chronicles of Darkness. So that's a nice little cheap book that came out recently as well. So is there anything else we want to discuss about who you can meet in the Chronicles of Darkness?
I don't know, Crystal, anything else to say?
No, I think that I wish I would see more people utilizing it in games and as a basis for games, or even starting like a launching point. Because I do feel like it is kind of like the forgotten aspect of Chronicles of Darkness.
A little bit. A lot of people pick up the Chronicles of Darkness core book, but they really want to focus on the supernatural splats. They want to be the cool vampire, or the sweet werewolf, or the powerful mage. And then when you're like, hey, do you want to play a gas station attendant? Some people might not be as excited. I'm excited, but I also like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay a lot. So Yeah, I'm that kind of guy.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely the approach that we've gone with the scenarios that we've got on the Storyteller's Vault. So the Hunger Within,
Oh,
as you said, Mike, you basically you played the.
Chris, you went wicked electronic right
Did
there.
I go
God
really
Machine just
electronic?
Yeah,
yeah,
Am
it
I
the
was
God
still
the
Machine
God
just took
electronic?
Machine.
over.
Oh,
Is it still
it's freaky,
electronic?
man.
Is it still?
Yeah,
No.
yeah. It's
Oh
still.
yeah.
Hold on a
You might
minute.
want to just like unplug your mic and plug it back in, maybe.
Yeah, it sounds like a
See if
wire
that
got
see
loose.
see if that works.
Is
Okay,
that
Chris is
better?
a no.
No.
Chris is astigmatic. Well, why don't we just wrap up the episode here? I think we got what we needed to, and
That
technology is
should
freaking
be
out on us. Oh,
better.
okay.
Yeah, so much
Now he's
better.
good. Okay, finish your thought, Chris, and
It
we'll get us
switched
out
on
of here
to
after that.
horrible webcam. That's why. Um, sorry, too many microphones in multiple places. That's awful. Yeah, so Storyteller's Vault, we've got two scenarios there, which play into that idea of playing just basic people. So, what is it? The Hunger Within is very folk horror. Again, Chronicles of Darkness, I think, perfectly suits running folk horror type stories. Characters, as Mike said, you played the firefighter. There's like a historian, a biology university student, and a ex law student slash barista. So back at home with parents, and then Sins Washed Away is a bunch of university students on a night out. So again, that's really mundane. And I think that is fun to play. That is, but the point is that you could run that as your prelude to a chronicle, or if you're running a chronicle of, like, say, if you're running your vampire chronicle, you could go, right, I want to set up the next arc. You could run a one shot within that campaign where you are just playing a bunch of mortals. And that's great because, much like playing a more, I guess, Nordic LARP event, a one shot, one night, singular event, LARP event, it gives you opportunity to your players to try something different, role play something different, and also there's zero risk if that character dies, because they're going to be playing their regular character for the rest of that chronicle again. So I think that's just a useful way of approaching and using Chronicles of Darkness, given that you've got all the toolkit there for it.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, since we have a couple minutes, Crystal, do you want to highlight the Mind's Eye Theater Chronicles of Darkness rules at all?
So the Mind's Eye Theater Chronicles of Darkness rules are actually still in the first edition. I don't believe they've ever updated them.
I don't think so.
And it was basically based off of the rock, paper, scissors as well, which was something that's carried over through all of the Mind's Eye Theater. And it came out, like, I really feel like and it's one thing we didn't really discuss, is that the second edition for Chronicles of Darkness is really where they found exactly what they wanted the game to be, whereas the first edition was kind of a little wishy-washy as far as what it wanted to be as a game system. And the Mind's Eye Theater rules kind of reflect that. You could easily update the rules. I don't think it'd be very hard to do so to kind of fit the new setting and everything like that. But it does focus heavily on the mortal aspect of interacting with the world of darkness, and it gives you some really cool scenes ideas on how to kind of display that in a LARP setting, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, it is. Just one minor correction. So Mind's Eye Theater Chronicles of Darkness used the cards, the playing cards, not the rock, paper, scissors.
Oh yeah, that's right. They did use the cards.
Yeah, I know, it's been a while.
Apologies.
It's been a while, but I just wanted to.
Wasn't it
for anyone new?
A system like where you show the card and your opponent shows the card and you sum it together, and then it's like what you use the units as the actual tens.
Well, for a basic roll, right? You add together, say, your attributes, and then you pull a card to see if you got a success.
Yeah.
Right. That's just the basic system for yourself. I don't know about the conflict resolution. I haven't played it, unfortunately. There
Conflict
was
resolution was whoever had the higher number between all
that
of
makes
them.
sense. You have to probably succeed and have the higher number.
Yeah,
Something
you
like
had
that.
to
It's
you
the
had to
usual
meet
thing, but
meet a number of successes, and then those above it.
yeah,
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, you're totally correct on that.
it's okay.
My apologies.
It's been a while. It's been a while, and
It's
we just wanted
been
to share that
many years.
for
Oh my
any
goodness.
indeed for any new players that were interested in that one, because there are still a number of Chronicles of Darkness LARPs out there and
Yes.
that
I
are
think
supported.
there's a Italian Requiem LARP that I'm aware of.
There was a Boston Requiem LARP, which I got invited to several times by different people. It was really weird. They just like would find me in the game store. I don't know what was going on, and they like saw me looking at World of Darkness books. Like, hey, you want to play some vampire?
If I just quickly look, there's also
Anyway.
I think it's Isles of Darkness in the UK, which is I think is a UK wide Chronicles of Darkness LARP group. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, there's different groups out there.
I think for a while Cam Fan Club did it too, and then they stopped, and then they went back to the previous edition, I think.
The fan club. All right, let's not bore people with us.
Yeah.
just pondering.
And
pondering
I
what's
know
going
it wasn't
on.
One World by Night, but it was one of the groups went to Chronicles of Darkness, Vampire Requiem for a little bit, and then went back.
Right. Yeah.
So
Mind's Eye Society,
it might be.
I think is what it's called now. I do know that they had some Chronicles of Darkness support as well as the other World of Darkness LARP things out there. But we can put some links in the show notes so that people can find out more about the LARP if they are interested, because we are not experts at this time, and we want this to be an expertise-filled stream and podcast episode when it goes out. So I think that's it for Chronicles of Darkness right there. And let's get on to the closing because we're running out of time. And there is something really important that we do want to talk about. As we're recording this, people are going to hear this later as a podcast, but there's a war going on in Europe, and it is horrific and devastating. And I know a lot of us hosts are, donating to different humanitarian organizations. And there's also a group effort between a lot of different streamers, podcasters, and game companies to get money over there to Ukraine. So the initiative is called Roll for Ukraine, and it's being spearheaded by Monocane Publishing, who we've had here on the show on Darker Days Radio before. And they're about to set up a GoFundMe. It's currently in review with GoFundMe, so it's not up yet. But when this goes out as a podcast, we'll have a link in the show notes. And all of the money is going to be going to either Nova Ukraine or the Ukrainian Red Cross. So the money is going to get there directly. And all the money is only going to be used for humanitarian refugee purposes. There's no money going to, say, like, military purposes or anything like that. So we definitely encourage people to check out Roll for Ukraine, and we will be putting some links and shares in our social media so that people can find that. In the meantime, as well, something you can also donate to is the International Committee for the Red Cross. We will put a link in the show notes for the Ukrainian donation page, which helps out a lot of people there, getting them water and helps rebuild infrastructure. So that's going to be very important for the future as well. And as well with the International Committee for the Red Cross, if there's other things that you would like to donate to, you can see their page for, say, Ethiopia right now, following the civil war or civil strife that was occurring there. Afghanistan, Yemen, and many other places can be donated to as well. So we think it's really important, especially in these trying times, to give some money to others, to help them out, give money to aid organizations. And those are the links we currently recommend. And further in closing, we are Darker Days Radio. We hope that you've enjoyed this Chronicles of Darkness introductory stream and podcast when it finally goes out. We have a linktree /Dark Days Radio, where you can find a link to all of our different social media, which is on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, and all these other places. As well, if you want to get in contact with us, you can send us an email over at darkdaysradio@gmail.com. That's all I've got to say. Chris, Crystal, do you have anything else you want to comment on, or should we head
Um,
off?
I think all I need to say is that hopefully, let's think. Next time we will be discussing Mage. That's the what we should have scheduled, and then after that we will have our rescheduled discussion about Werewolf in the month after that. So in a month's time we'll be back with more Chronicles of Darkness discussion talking about Mage the Awakening.
Yep, absolutely. All right, good stuff. Thank you everyone for listening, and to all the listeners out there, take it easy and have a good night.